She left home expecting an ordinary night. A short drive, quick visit. She promised her mom she'd be back soon. But 20-year-old Charisma Ehresman never came back. By morning, panic gripped her family. Days later, heartbreak shattered them. Hidden in her abandoned car, deep within a crowded Chicago street, lay the horrifying truth, and behind it, a man no one ever suspected. Welcome. This is Crime Uncovered, where every case has a story, and the truth is often stranger and darker than fiction. If you haven't subscribed yet, kindly do so to stay updated on the latest crimes we uncover. It was supposed to be a normal night, routine, safe. Just another chapter in a young woman's life filled with hopes for the future. For 20-year-old Charisma Ehresman, every day brimmed with possibility. Born on September 17, 2001, in the quiet and close-knit town of Forest View, Illinois, she had been surrounded by love since day one. Her parents, family, and friends all saw the same radiant light in her. A kind soul who gave more than she ever asked for in return. From her earliest days, it was clear Charisma was special. Her father, Jeffrey Ehresman, recalled moments that perfectly captured her essence. As a toddler at the park, she would often walk right up to other children with a bright smile and ask, "Do you want to be friends?" She never saw strangers, only friends she hadn't met yet. Charisma's openness wasn't just charming. It was genuine. She believed in kindness and wore her heart openly and proudly. As the years passed, those simple, innocent traits matured into profound values. Compassion defined Charisma. She was humble, gentle, and impossibly trusting. Nursing felt like her destiny, not just a career choice. To Charisma, it was about helping others through their most vulnerable moments. She had enrolled at Triton College in River Grove, determined to make her dream a reality. She worked hard, juggling 2 jobs to pay for school, saving every penny, and making quiet sacrifices along the way. Even when the pandemic disrupted life for so many, Charisma stayed focused. Without telling many people, she re-enrolled in school after a year away, eager to continue chasing her dreams. It wasn't about recognition or accolades, it was about purpose. Her life was full in all the ways that mattered. When she wasn't studying or working, she poured her love into her family and friends. To them, Charisma was irreplaceable. She never missed important moments. She was Titi to her young niece, the aunt who remembered every little thing, who was always ready with a hug or a silly joke, and who never ended a conversation without saying, "I love you." Charisma had no enemies. She lived simply, surrounded by love, and trusted the people around her. There was no reason for her, or those who cared about her, to believe danger was lurking nearby. But evil does not always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives quietly, behind the mask of friendship, in the form of a familiar face. And as Charisma's story would soon prove, trust can sometimes be the very thing that invites darkness in. That Sunday evening was supposed to be another beautiful evening. January 23, 2022. The weekend winding down, families settling in, and Charisma Ehresman preparing for what should have been an ordinary night. At exactly 10:17 p.m., Charisma left the comfort of her family's home in Forest View, Illinois. She said goodbye, casually reassuring her mother that she wouldn't be long. She had slipped into simple clothes, a tan jacket, black pants, and a small pink rucksack over her shoulder. It was a modest outfit for a short trip. Nothing about it suggested danger or finality. She climbed into her red 2014 Ford Fiesta, a car that family and friends easily recognized for its vibrant color. The night was cold, but routine. Nobody could have imagined it would be the last time they would ever see Charisma alive. Hours had passed without a word from her. At first, the silence felt odd, but not alarming. Charisma was dependable and always communicative. If she was running late or changed her plans, she always texted her mom or sent a quick call. But that night, nothing. Calls to her phone went straight to voicemail. Text messages hung, unread. So many thoughts ran through her mother, but nothing in particular to lay hands on. By the early hours of the next morning, January 24th, worry had morphed into something far darker, dread. This wasn't like her. Her father, Jeffrey Ehresman, would later recall in heart-wrenching interviews, "She's not the type to just take off. She doesn't vanish. This wasn't my daughter's pattern." At noon, they could wait no longer. They filed a missing persons report with the Forest View police. Immediately, authorities treated the case with urgency. This wasn't the behavior of a rebellious teen. This was out of character, terrifyingly so. The first priority of the search was clear: to find the red Ford Fiesta, since once it's found, Charisma would be found as well. The colored car should have been easy to locate. Officers jumped into action, searching through Forest View and beyond. They carefully combed the streets, busy intersections, grocery store parking lots, alleys, and even remote industrial areas. Helicopters hovered overhead. Officers scoured every inch, every lot. Days passed. The town held its breath. Flyers were pasted all over the place indicating Charisma was missing. Friends and volunteers launched search efforts of their own, spreading Charisma's face across social media. The posts went viral. Strangers hundreds of miles away shared her photo, hoping to bring her home. But as the days wore on, hope began to dim. It wasn't till 5 agonizing days, on January 28, 2022, that everything changed. By 5:30 p.m., police located Charisma's car abandoned on Chicago's west side, in the 5900 block of West Iowa Street. It was parked in a crowded residential area, surrounded by other vehicles. The choice of location seemed strategic, blending the vehicle in so it would not raise suspicions as other cars were packed along Charisma's. But the car told a horrifying story. The passenger side window was shattered, with shards of glass glinting under the fading sun. There was mud clung to the tires as though it had been driven off-road at some point before arriving at its final resting place. More suspiciously, the back seats were folded down, creating more space in the back. A silent, haunting indicator that something terrible had happened inside. And then came the worst discovery of all. Charisma was there, in the back seat, lifeless. For 5 days, her body had been in that car, hidden in plain sight while the city moved on around her. She had been strangled and suffocated, her life stolen in the cruelest, most intimate way imaginable. The Cook County Medical Examiner later ruled her death a homicide. The questions were overwhelming and horrifying. What happened during those last few moments in the car? Did Charisma beg for her life? Did she know her killer? Her family was shattered. The community was shaken to its core. But for the police, grief would have to wait. They now faced a much darker mission. The search for Charisma had ended. The hunt for her killer had just begun. With Charisma's death now officially ruled a homicide, the clock started ticking for investigators. Whoever had done this was still out there, and likely thought they had gotten away with murder. Detectives immediately shifted their focus to the hours leading up to Charisma's brutal death. The answers, they believed, lay somewhere in her digital footprint. Like most young adults, Charisma lived much of her life through her phone. Texts, calls, social media, and dating apps, they held fragments of her final moments. Investigators knew that if they followed the trail carefully, they might find the person responsible. It didn't take long before one name rose to the surface. Richard Chavez, 24 years old. He wasn't a random stranger. In fact, he was disturbingly familiar to law enforcement. Chavez had a criminal record, a past littered with red flags, charges of resisting arrest, contributing to the delinquency of a minor, and other brushes with the law painted a troubling picture of a man with little regard for rules or morality. Through deeper investigation, police discovered that Charisma had met Chavez online. Their connection had begun digitally, innocent at first, but like many online encounters, it carried hidden risks. She was trusting. He was predatory. The perfect storm. Charisma's final call and final text had been to Chavez the night she vanished. It wasn't speculation, it was fact. Phone records revealed that he was the last person she had contacted before the darkness swallowed her whole. This immediately put Chavez in the spotlight. Detectives wasted no time. They arrived at his home in Oak Park, a quiet, unassuming area not far from where Charisma had been last seen alive. What they saw when Chavez answered, the door set off immediate alarms. He was nervous, genuinely shocked. His eyes darted like a man cornered. His answers stumbled, riddled with hesitation. Still, Chavez tried to play it cool. He spun his story quickly. Charisma had come over on the night of the 23rd, he told them. They hung out. Everything was fine. According to him, she left on her own early in the morning, alive and well. But his body told another story. Detectives immediately noticed something unsettling. Fresh scratches on his hands. Thin, red marks trailed across his knuckles and fingers. The kind of wounds that don't appear by accident. The kind of wounds left behind when someone fights for their life. Still, they needed more than gut feelings. And that's when the case cracked wide open. Surveillance footage began to surface. Detectives combed through security cameras from nearby homes. What they found destroyed Chavez's version of events. At 10:40 p.m. on January 23rd, Charisma was seen entering his home. She never came back out. Not in the minutes, not in the hours, not at all. The next morning, around 7:30 a.m. on January 24th, Chavez was captured casually walking to Charisma's red Ford Fiesta. Alone. No sign of Charisma. He got into her car and drove away. His destination? West Iowa Street on the west side of Chicago, where, coldly and calculatedly, he abandoned the car. Surveillance footage then showed him calmly leaving the area on foot. He walked for nearly an hour, then called his brother to come pick him up. Charisma's car and her lifeless body would sit there for 5 more days, hidden in plain sight. Detectives now knew Chavez was lying. But the deeper they dug, the darker it became. When they arrested him, more sinister discoveries surfaced. In Chavez's bedroom, investigators found hair clippings in the trash, suggesting he may have cut his hair in an attempt to change his appearance. Alongside that was a partially packed suitcase. Chavez was preparing to run. Even more incriminating was what they heard on jailhouse phone calls after his arrest. Chavez, speaking to his parents, gave them a chilling directive. Get my passport ready. In that moment, it became clear Chavez was not grieving. He was not innocent. He was plotting his escape. The digital evidence, the surveillance footage, the scratches on his hands, and his panicked actions all pointed to one conclusion. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a cold-blooded murder, carried out by a man who lured a trusting young woman to her death, and then tried to bury the truth along with her. Faced with a mountain of undeniable evidence, the surveillance videos, the damning digital trail, and the incriminating scratches etched into his skin, Richard Chavez began to crumble. At first, he clung to his lies with desperation. She left on her own, he told detectives repeatedly. His words were hollow, his eyes evasive, but the investigators were prepared. They had built a precise and unbreakable timeline. Charisma never left his house alive. Cameras captured her entering his Oak Park home late that night, but never coming out. Her phone stopped moving just minutes after her arrival. And in the early hours of dawn, Chavez had been caught on video driving her car alone, later abandoning it on West Iowa Street, the same vehicle where Charisma's lifeless body would be discovered 5 long days later. When the weight of reality hit him, Chavez's defenses fell apart. Silence filled the interrogation room, but silence gave way to something even more chilling: confession. In a cold, detached tone that unnerved even the most seasoned detectives, Richard Chavez began to explain what had happened behind closed doors. There had been no fight, no argument, no sudden rage. This was premeditated in its darkest form. Charisma, gentle, trusting, and unaware, had agreed to visit him, believing it was harmless. They had met online. They had chatted. But what she didn't realize was that Richard Chavez was a predator cloaked in normalcy. In his confession, Chavez revealed the disturbing shift. Once she was inside his home, his demeanor changed. He made unwanted advances, and when Charisma refused, he snapped. Violence erupted. He overpowered her. He strangled her, cutting off her breath and ignoring the terror in her eyes. She fought back with everything she had, her nails slashing and digging into his hands and arms, leaving the scratches that would later expose his lies. Her final moments were filled with panic, confusion, and heartbreak. But Chavez's cruelty didn't stop with her death. Driven by cold calculation, he devised a way to hide what he had done. He loaded Charisma's lifeless body into the back seat of her own car, a vehicle that, just hours earlier, she had driven with hopes of returning home. He drove quietly through Chicago in the dead of night. The streets, busy by day, were now dark and indifferent. At West Iowa Street, a neighborhood crowded with parked cars and overlooked by most, he chose his hiding place. He left her there, hidden in plain sight. Her body, discarded like something meaningless, sat in that car as days passed and hope faded. Chavez, meanwhile, returned to normal life as though nothing had happened. He cleaned up. He cut his hair, tossing the clippings in the trash. He even partially packed a suitcase. Investigators later found it sitting by his bed, half full and waiting. In his jailhouse calls to his parents, he whispered his final cowardly plan. "Get my passport ready." Even in the shadow of murder, Richard Chavez was ready to run. But by then, it was too late. The evidence had caught up. His lies were unraveling, and the monster behind the mask had finally been unmasked. By the summer of 2023, prosecutors were ready to bring the case to trial. Chavez faced the most serious charge possible: first-degree murder, alongside counts of kidnapping and tampering with evidence. Despite the gravity of the accusations, he maintained a cold and emotionless demeanor through early hearings. The evidence was stacked high, surveillance footage placing him with Charisma the night of her death. Digital data proving her last calls and texts were to him. His confession, supported by physical evidence like hair clippings, scratches, and the abandoned car. Recorded phone calls in jail, hinting at plans to escape prosecution. In court, Charisma's family sat just feet away from the man who stole their daughter. During victim impact statements, her father Jeffrey spoke directly to Chavez, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. "You took my baby girl," he said. "You stole her future. You stole our peace. You stole from her little niece who still asks for her TT. You didn't just murder Charisma. You murdered our family's joy." Her grandmother, Kathy, also addressed Chavez. "If you only knew what a loving soul Charisma was. She loved everyone. She gave love freely. And you destroyed that." In July 2023, Chavez, faced with irrefutable evidence and overwhelming public disgust, pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. Judge Susana Ortiz handed down the sentence without hesitation: life in prison without parole, forever caged. Yet, for Charisma's family and loved ones, true justice remained elusive. No sentence could bring her back or erase the nightmare of what she endured. As they left the courtroom that day, they knew Chavez would never walk free again. Still, they also knew their pain would never truly fade. Even after the trial concluded, the town of Forest View and the larger Chicago community struggled to process the senseless tragedy. Charisma's family and friends honored her memory through vigils, fundraisers, and tributes. At her funeral and wake, hundreds gathered: classmates, co-workers, fellow students from Triton College, and neighbors who had watched her grow up. Her father Jeffrey said the wake felt like a celebration of who she was, but also the most painful day of my life. Charisma's niece, too young to understand the permanence of death, continued to ask heartbreaking questions. "Where's TT? When will TT come home?" For months after, those closest to Charisma wrestled with guilt and sorrow. The randomness of the violence, the idea that she met a monster through something as casual as an online connection, haunted them. Her best friends described her as someone who just saw the good in people. That trusting nature, they realized too late, was exploited by a predator hiding behind charm and false promises. For Richard Chavez, his story ended in prison. For Charisma, her story ended in the back seat of her own car, far from her dreams, her family, and everything she deserved. For her family, however, the story will never truly end. They continue to live every day in the shadow of what happened, forever robbed of the simple joys of having her in their lives. As of 2024, Chavez remains incarcerated, and no further appeals or motions have been made public. Justice, in the legal sense, was served. But for the Ehresman family and for the people of Forest View, the loss of Charisma left a wound that may never fully heal. In the end, what stays with those who loved Charisma isn't the horror of how she died, but how she lived. A vibrant, loving young woman who worked hard, loved harder, and dreamed of becoming a nurse to help others. A daughter who texted her mom when she was running late. A niece who gave bear hugs so tight they made you feel safe. A friend who would have done anything to make those around her smile. In her father's words, she squeezed all her love into every hug. That's who she was. The story of Charisma Ehresman serves as both a cautionary tale and a heartbreaking reminder. Evil can wear a friendly face. Trust can be exploited. And life, even one so full of promise, can be stolen in a single tragic moment. Yet through their grief, Charisma's family has vowed to keep her memory alive. They speak her name, they share her story, and they remind the world of what was taken and what must never be forgotten. Every victim deserves their story told. If you found this case as chilling as we did, subscribe to Crime Uncovered and help keep their memory alive. Until next time, keep questioning everything.